All right, it's good to be with you. Cisco Walker here with you again, an evangelist here in the International District. And I have a short homily for you today, so bear with me and I hope it will be a blessing for you. We're talking about Luke chapter 12, verses 49 through 56. I'm going to read them for you tonight. Jesus says this, "I came to send fire on the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. But I have a baptism to be baptized with, and how distressed I am till it is accomplished. Do you suppose that I came to give peace on earth? I tell you, not at all, but rather division. From now on, 5 in one house will be divided, 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. Father will be divided against son, and son against father. Mother against daughter, and daughter against mother. Mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law." Then he said to the multitudes, "Whenever you see a cloud rising out of the west, immediately you say, 'A shower is coming,' and so it is. And when you see the south wind blow, you say, 'There will be hot weather,' and there it is. Hypocrites! You can discern the face of the sky and of the earth, but how is it you do not discern this time?" Tonight, just for a few moments, I want to talk to you about how Christ brings division. Our text tonight is an aspect of Jesus' character and demeanor that at times seem foreign to us, especially in 2025. In this particular passage, Jesus is dealing with concepts such as fire. He's talking about fire being kindled. He's talking about baptism, the baptism of his death. He's talking about being distressed. He's talking about division. And he's talking about how people will be against him and how even he might be against others. You know, most of the time we see Jesus through cliches or stereotypical lenses. You remember in the late 70s, there was a song that says, "Jesus is just all right with me." In the 80s, Depeche Mode had a song that was entitled, "Your Own Personal Jesus." In the 1990s, late 90s, early 2000s, we had the mantra of, "Jesus is my homeboy." Most of the time with these cliches of a stereotypical Jesus, we think about a Jesus who is peaceful and docile, a come-as-you-are Jesus. We think about a non-confrontational Jesus, and we certainly think about a non-controversial Jesus. But rarely do we think about an apocryphal Jesus. Rarely do we think about a Jesus who tells us that the hand of judgment will be extended to those who reject him. Rarely do we think about a Jesus who requires us to choose him or the world. And rarely do we think about a Jesus who insists that we choose him, quite possibly over family, over relatives, and maybe even our own children. Jesus tells us in the narrative that he is distressed. This distress was due to the heavy burden that Christ would bear at the cross. Can I tell you tonight that we as evangelicals must also remember that we are called to carry the weight of humanity on our shoulders. You and I, the church, just as Jesus would experience injustice in its most repulsive form, we, the church, will also experience times and seasons of injustice. And just as Jesus was betrayed and forgotten by all his disciples and his most trusted friends, you and I, the church, will at times face the ugly reality of betrayal. You know, Jesus was distressed because he knew that the Father's will would be painful. He knew that the Father's will would be agonizing. He knew that the Father's will would be humiliating. And he knew ultimately in the end that his Father's will would bring about his death. However, even though Jesus was distressed, he was also able to see beyond the pain, the suffering, and know that his death and resurrection would change the course of humanity. Jesus tells us in the passage that he did not come to bring peace. This statement is paradoxical in nature because, after all, Jesus is the Prince of Peace. Once again, there are times and seasons when Jesus will demand complete allegiance. Our desire to remain popular will be tested by Christ himself. Our desire to remain relevant will be tested by Christ himself. Our desire to remain neutral will be tested by Christ himself. We as evangelicals must remember that God is a jealous God, and our devotion towards him will be tested and tried some of the time. Jesus tells us that he came to bring division, particularly within the familial dynamic. There are some who have there are a lot of people, they have a great respect for their families, great admiration for their families, great loyalty towards their families. And then there are others who struggle to show their family charity. They struggle to show their family loyalty. They struggle to show their family respect. But Jesus demands complete allegiance to him. Many have taken these verses in a strict and literal sense and believe that Jesus is commanding us to leave our family completely and live for him without their interference. I'm not here today to tell you that I'm promoting a cult. I'm not here today to tell you that Jesus is telling you to leave your family, to leave your wife, to leave your children. But he does want to be number one in your heart. There can be times when family members will hinder your relationship with God, and then we must decide who is more important. But usually, predominantly, this is not the case. Jesus' ministry caused familial division during his lifetime as people struggled with the question of the legitimacy of his claims as a prophet. Remember that in the Gospels, Jesus' brothers and close family members didn't think that he really was the Messiah. You know, there's going to be times in your Christian experience when family members will question whether your devotion to Christ is real and genuine. There will be times in your walk with Christ when people that you work with will question the validity of your Christian experience. There will be times when family and those closest to you will doubt your allegiance to Christ. Maybe even your own sons, maybe even your own daughters. Some will see your devotion to Christ as weakness and just a way to hide from reality. You know, that was a Nietzschean criticism. Nietzsche says, okay, well, you need religion because you're weak. You need religion because you're cowards. You need religion because you are afraid. Because if you were afraid to take the reins of your own life, do what you want, to hell with the consequences, and this is why you need Jesus. This is why you need religion. This is why you need your morality, because you're weak and you have no courage and you're a coward. This was a Nietzschean criticism. But sometimes we will see that in our lives, and you will be judged for your belief in Jesus, and people will think that about you. But hold fast to the faith. Jesus calls his disciples to a new sense of kinship in the Lucan narrative. Jesus reminds us that the Christian actually has two families. There's a biological family and there's also a spiritual family. The family of God is usually stronger than the biological family. The family of God is usually healthier than the biological family. The family of God is supposed to be more edifying than the biological family. I believe that we have to constantly and consistently ask for God to soften our hearts with both families, biological and spiritual. Jesus tells his audience that they're hypocrites and that they cannot interpret this present time. You know, the definition of a hypocrite is someone who pretends to be virtuous or religious while lacking genuine sincerity or moral conviction. The Bible frequently criticizes hypocrisy, particularly in religious leaders who outwardly follow religious laws but fail to live by them authentically. The church and its members are constantly being challenged by the Holy Spirit as it concerns hypocrisy. It is hard for us to admit that there is more hypocrisy lurking in the dark corners of our heart than we like to admit. Daily confession in our daily prayer life is so important and will help us to strive to be genuine and sincere in our devotion to Christ. Finally, Jesus tells his audience that they cannot interpret this present time. Jesus knew that the majority of Israel could not recognize that he was the Messiah. He also knew that he could not actually fulfill the Father's will due to their unbelief. their hardness of heart and their stubbornness. Think of the miracles that Jesus could have accomplished. Think of the healings that he could have accomplished. Think of the transformations, the true metanoia that could have taken place. And I know that healings took place, and he healed the sick, and he raised the dead, and he cleansed the lepers, and he did all those things, but he could have done so much more. But because they could not interpret the present time, he was limited in what he could do. Many times you and I, the church, fail to realize that Christ wants to do so much more in our hearts. He wants to do so much more in our families, and he wants to do so much more in our communities. As I close tonight, I just want to encourage you. Jesus wants to do more. He wants to do more with your marriage. He wants to do more with your ministry. He wants to do more with your heart, and he wants to do more in your communities. If we will only let him, and if we can only discern what he really wants to do. God bless you. Thank you.